Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special interview episode of the Hapless Heroes podcast, the first of its kind, in fact. We are joined today by Connor Self, who is one of the project leads of what has become I'm going to just say one of our favorite homebrew source books, that is the Spelljammer's Cookbook, which is available on the DMs Guild for you to check out. Connor, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Francesco. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, and then with me is my co-host, my co-creator of the show, Dave. Say hello, Dave.
Hey, everybody.
So, Connor, before we get started with the actual interview here, would you mind just giving maybe a brief introduction of yourself for the members of our audience who may not be familiar with who you are or some of the work that you do?
Well, hello, audience. Thanks for taking the time out to listen today. My name is Connor Self. I publish under my full name, Jonathan Connor Self. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a therapist and a gaming creative. I have done an awful lot of work in this gaming sphere, spans back over a decade. Besides that awesome work I have where I use games to teach kids social skills and help bring families together. By night, I work with a ton of conventions, have authored a number of products. I helped found D8 Summit Charities. We're a 501c3. We run charity events to raise money for quality local causes. We've done that for quite some time. I give expert interviews and speak on panels at conventions all over the country. I'm off to one next week, Big Bad Con in San Francisco, California.
That's awesome.
It's my first time.
We're obviously very honored that you've taken the time to join us, within this busy schedule of yours. Means a lot to us. We really just have, it's actually surprising to me how much of your work I've consumed without knowing it was you until, going through the Spelljammer's Cookbook, just because of all the stuff I've seen through the DMs Guild and through Matt Colville's, the MCDM, right? Is that, yes. Yeah. It's again, it's an honor to have you. So, before we get into talking about the cookbook itself, which is the actually, what we're going to center this interview around, just kind of have a few maybe introductory questions, because you had filled out a questionnaire prior to joining us on the show and got to know a little bit about your background, just as a, where you've been in the TTRPG sphere and in general. So, first of all, your writing credits for D&D specifically span much further than just this book, which we talked about, right? I think I read somewhere it's something over like 20 products for Wizards of the Coast and MCDM combined. Like that's a lot of writing. So among like everything that you've worked on, what would you say maybe are your personal favorites or highlights among them?
Well, you are sitting on a product that I really, really love. Spelljammer's Cookbook was the dad joke gone horribly awry. Like you make one dad joke and suddenly it consumes your life for the better part of a year. That's pretty much what Spelljammer's was. But the team was incredible, and there was such positive energy, and there were so many great ideas that came out of it. I have to say I am a big fan of the charity work that we've done. We've raised tens of thousands of dollars for homeless shelters, food banks, mental health, suicide prevention, minority support, historical museums. Like we've done a lot of cool stuff with that. Mm-hmm. And that's one of my favorite things in gaming, even though you're like, well, you didn't actually run a game. No, but I helped thousands of people enjoy them. Let's see, what else? Some of my work, I really did enjoy the work I did for MCDM. James Introcaso really took the time to deep dive with me into monster design, and I got to play around a lot with the fiddly bits of Dungeons and Dragons. I'd have to say that a lot of these experiences, it's really hard to pick a few. Because each one is so like personally meaningful. And,
sure.
And I think that's true for a lot of us in the design space. Mm-hmm. We pick projects and do things as as you both have yourself, that give our lives meaning. I think it's why a lot of people come to the table and share this hobby in general. It's a way to add value to our lives, and it's no different on this side of the keyboard. Putting the words on paper, it's not as different as it seems from taking those words on the paper and turning them into a shared experience with your friends.
I completely agree, right? I mean, we do this podcast not for like a job or anything. We all have day jobs and lives outside of this, but this is like a hobby that like means something to us, right? Like we do this for ourselves, and we also to sort of also do it for our audience who provide feedback and just really enjoy and just feel like they're sitting at a table with us. And I feel like that's the beautiful thing about this game, is that it's such a great way to like kind of bring different people together to just like have a shared like experience. Love that. So you also mentioned, since we're talking about D&D, and that's what brings us all together, right? You've been playing since 1991, which I don't mean to date anyone here. I'm not saying that. I think Dave also started around
right
that
here.
time.
Stop.
Sorry, Dave. So I feel like you may have already answered this question, but I'm not sure if you wanted to expand on it. But like, the other question we had was, I guess, like, what would you say is your favorite part of this amazing game of Dungeons and Dragons that's kept you playing, or involved in it for so long?
Okay, so I was reflecting just this last weekend. I had a charity event that I ran with folks, and we were sitting around and we were just talking about the game in general. And I think at the heart of the game is the relationships you make with people around the table at the same time. I don't want to sound cheesy or cliche, but as we're talking about, we all just kind of agreed. It's like, yeah, really, the game is an excuse. Like it's an excuse just to get around, BS with friends, or make new friends, create a bigger community. Like I often see it like a convention setting, where you're meeting new players, you're expanding your network of friends. It's really just a chance to connect with other people. And that's what sets an experience like this apart from video games. Baldur's Gate 3, awesome,
Yeah, incredible
game.
masterpiece.
Yeah, it's beautifully done, but it doesn't connect you with other people the same way.
Not in the same way. We did attempt a live stream where a few of us got together to try to play through it, but it's such a different experience because you are a lot more on the rails, and there's just less of that that opportunity to really like kind of sink your teeth into whatever character you are, and just goof off and goof around with your friends, because there's the objectives are much more clear. They're less malleable than like they would be at a table where it's just you're just crafting stories as a group.
That sounds like it's a very D&D thing, because it's a D&D really is just sitting around a table with your friends telling a story. The table's optional, and as long as you're telling a story with people, you will become friends with them after a certain amount of time.
Like Dave and I became best friends through this game. He sat down at like the first time I was my first time ever DMing. I was like a friend in the local game store. Met Dave there, found out he was the older brother to somebody I went to high school with who I was close with, right? And we started writing a story together after that campaign sort of fell apart. And we've been best friends now for many years because and same with everybody who's like part of this table. I mean, I feel like you hear so many other like D&D podcasts, and also just groups say that their friendships were forged through these because where else are you going to be able to get a bunch of adults together to meet at a scheduled regular time, right? And spend like 3 to 5 hours together, right? You're going to get to know each other. You're going to learn a lot of things about each other, both through the ways that you play the game and how you interact outside of it as well. It's beautiful. Okay. Wow. It's a great answer. I really have no good segue to the next question, but we're talking about how we can kind of make this game however we want. You're no stranger to homebrew. You've written plenty of material for it. So I guess, could you speak to your perspective on like what role like homebrew rules and supplements kind of play within tabletop RPGs? Like not even just D&D, right? Because like this stuff is available for any systems you may find out there.
So when you're looking at like products to throw into your existing campaign, maybe the campaign that you use, the key source books. We all know those printed hardbound books. They sit on the shelf like they are behind me right now in my video. We You're looking for things that are going to add to your game. Like, what are the dynamic elements that are there? Because I'm trying to think of how to describe it. Um, what you have from the core books is a very generic version of the game that's created to cater to everybody. It is the bland restaurant food that you get that most people find generally agreeable, and it crosses across everything. But sometimes you want to try something different. Sometimes you want something with a little bit more spice, or sometimes you want something a little bit different. So homebrew can really get at that, because behind every homebrew, behind every third party piece, is a team of creatives who are like, this is what would add value in our perspective to games, to this game. Like, this is my idea of what would add celery, onion, and pepper to.
Yes.
Yeah, I had to go immediately to the Holy Trinity. I'm sorry, but like, this is what would add that flavor to a game, and it would make me enjoy it. And so now you've got people out there, other creatives, who are adding those things to the games that they want to see. For me, that's incredibly important. I want in my games incredibly flavorful characters, very believable NPCs with very full sets of motivations and personalities. And so my products are tailored to deliver that. Even in official products that I've written for Wizards of the Coast, when I wrote, for example, Terror in 10 Towns, which was the season 8 epic for their Adventurers League program, the main big bad, if players wanted to dig into that, you could find an incredibly relatable reason why this intelligent winter wolf, this is doing what she's doing, that everything is starving, and people focus very heavily in Rime of the Frost Maiden on the fact that the towns are starving, but they don't really stop and think that other things in the wild, all these other creatures that coexist in this ecosystem, they're also starving. And when you're a mother and you have a den of pups at home and they're starving, you're going to do what you feel you need to do to feed them. And so at base level, oh yeah, this is an intelligent beastie that is motivating a bunch of animals to attack our town, but she's doing it from a position of motherhood. And I want villains that are relatable, because really, I take the perspective that I guess maybe I'm one of those folks that say both people that we would consider good and evil are relatable. They're still people. They've got motivations that any of us can relate to, and sometimes maybe any of us are one or two steps away from being the villain in somebody else's story arc ourselves.
I mean, it's very true, and I think that speaks to probably one of the core, like the tenets of that. Like, I try to. I don't successfully do this with every big bad that we craft, but like for our ultimate story arc, right? For like what I ended the campaign on, like right, I had this villain that I had been planning to use for. I mean, again, you had mentioned, right, 7 years we had been writing, and working our way up to this end. And, when to finally be able to reveal that, to kind of show the motivations behind that character, to kind of show you two versions of them, like who they were after they became the villain, and then who they were before, just the person, because it just, and you hear from the audience when people are saying like, man, like I really like that hit, like this person hits a little too close to home because like I see a lot of myself in them or this and that. But that's what makes a compelling villain, right? Because like, you can have your big capital B big bads, hell bent on just destruction for the sake of chaos and destruction, but there's nothing. It just feels you feel very distant from that kind of evil, right? It's just it's very blah. It's very like there's no further motivation besides just destruction. But like when you add these layers, like that human element, because like we are all humans consuming these stories, and like we draw upon analogs within our lives to inspire us to tell these stories, to create motivations for these characters. I think that's probably one of the core tenets of like writing good villains. So I love to hear that. That makes me so happy. Cool. Yeah. And I completely agree. Right. I think homebrew is one of those things, because like D&D can be very, like, I think that other way to put it, right, like, is it's almost like the blank canvas, right? 5th edition was almost sort of built to be this very adaptable game system and very approachable, so that you could play it vanilla and have a wonderful time, right? You could grab whatever books you want and use them in whatever combination, and you can tell whatever compelling stories you want. But homebrew is where you get to add all the bells and whistles. It's just the imagination at work condensed somewhere that's easy to reference and is hopefully not broken. And if it is, whatever, we'll fix it or we'll adapt things, on the fly, because that's part of the game too. It's just
that's the DM's job. That's the
DM's job, exactly. All right, so let's talk about this particular piece of homebrew then, because it's very, very, like, from the day that I picked it up and like read through it, I fell in love with this cookbook, because like of all the different sections, the way that it was put together, because let's just start by saying, what is the Spelljammer's cookbook and what inspired you to create it? You had mentioned something about a dad joke, and I'm curious about this now.
Okay, so so it was a dad joke. When I became aware that we were going to get a Spelljammer setting, I made a joke about jam. Like, what do Spelljammers put on their toast? It was just something stupid, and my friends laughed, and some of them groaned, and we're just talking about. And I'm like, no, like really, like what if we did a cookbook, like an actual cookbook with like preserves and stuff, but also like some character stuff, but really a cookbook. And my friends are like, that is either inspired or stupid or both. Like, and then a couple people were like, let's do that. Let's really make a go of creating a cookbook with very, very playable character options. And so you could cook up your character, or you could cook up some food, or both. And so that's sort of how the Spelljammer's cookbook was born. We took a design philosophy of going against the grain and getting as many cooks to ruin the soup as possible. And so we cast a really wide net, and we're like, we want as many diverse ideas as we could possibly get, with just fun ways to re-envision the core Dungeons and Dragons classes in a space setting. And then we got to talk, okay, well, like, are we talking like space swashbuckling, like Flash Gordon, or are we talking about like a little bit crunchier science fiction like Star Trek? And I'm like, let's do both. And so
all of it.
So I'm not even joking. If you go through the book, there are a minimum of 2 subclasses for each class, and one is crunchy and the other is swashbuckling.
So I noticed that, and that's something that really resonated with us, because we wanted, like, in the custom setting that we were creating, we wanted something that felt a little bit more crunchy sci-fi and less swashbuckling in space, but with still some of those fantastical magical elements, just a little bit more futuristic than the traditional Spelljammer setting. And so I saw this and I was like, this is like top tier, like silliness, like really leaning into those concepts. And I think that a lot of the character options that our players chose kind of fly through that range of both the fantastical and the crunchy. It's so cool. So you mentioned that you worked with quite a lot of people, right, to put this together. So can you tell us maybe a little bit more about some of those folks, and like what your creative, like, or collaborative process was like in putting all of this together? Because I can imagine with so many cooks in the kitchen, it's probably hard to kind of collate all that information into something that's like digestible, right?
Well, it was a pretty gargantuan undertaking. Pardon the pun. We really wanted to include as many people as possible because we really wanted to give a sense of whimsy, and whimsy means kind of just floating around and giving a lot of different people a say. So I immediately reached out to my friend Sean. Sean Banerjee is a lead at the Word Refinery. It's an organization that I've worked with in the past. I'm like, Sean, do you have people that you think if we could cast like a really wide net and just get a bunch of different people to write for this? And he's like, sure. So Sean stepped on as the project manager, and I stuck toward the project lead and providing a lot of the creative direction, whereas he did a lot of the nuts and bolts work. We brought on some really talented people. Elizabeth Banerjee took on the role of lead editor. We brought in Catherine Barson. She is the gluttonous geek on Twitter, and she does inspired recipes from all different sorts of fandoms. And so she knocked out some custom recipes and photography. We brought in Matthew Sargent. He's an artist in the Chicagoland area who is really talented at that sort of comic book feel, and that really drove home the feel we were trying to get overall with the book. We wanted something that was a little bit action oriented in the pictures, and so we brought him in. He did an iconic for every single subclass. That's a lot of art that he put together for that.
I was going to say, this thing is packed with art.
It was absolutely, that was really cool. We had Ian Gopal Gould. He came on as graphic designer and just sort of oversaw the overlay. And then we just brought on some incredible people all the way around to help design these classes, with the caveat, like, just do whatever you want. I mean, I am not even joking. It really was create whatever you want. And they're like, well, Connor, like, what do you think about this? I'm like, and my answer was pretty much, that's cool.
Yeah, like, you just yes and.
Yes, do it. Maybe this, add this, or yeah, this is great. And what do you think about this? But it really wrote itself at that point, because people are like, I've got this great idea for a swashbuckler version of a barbarian, and I really want to make this happen. And we're like, okay, you own that now. Write it up and send it off. And so that's how this was done. Everybody picked the subclasses they wanted to write. Everybody delivered pitches. We lifted each other up. That chat was so positive. And so that's how we end up with just some of the best designers that I've ever had a chance to work with. I was looking down the list again and just floored. Jay Anderson, Arthur Guilford, Ben Heisler, who has gone on to write G.I. Joe now, the G.I. Joe product line. Joel Klein, Jessica Markham, the Angry Nerd Girl, Gwendolyn Marshall, who created Races and Ancestry. She wrote for this. Adria Mejia, who is now the lead for the Kaboa product that you might have heard of. That's his baby. Ian Pace, Todd Stashwick, Captain No.
I know. I was so surprised to see his name in the credits. I was like, "Holy crap!" Like, just this is like such a who's who of like all over the spectrum of creatives, right? Yeah. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, Shu Ching Tan is an Emmy winner. Marcelo de Velasquez is an old time friend of mine who is a celebrated scholar now for Big Bad Con. Like, there are just some incredible people that were involved in this project, and it came together beautifully. Like, it turned out 5 times better than I ever imagined it could be, based on just a really bad joke that just took a life of its own.
And those are the kind of projects that really work. The kind of ideas that you're looking at this is either going to get an A or it's going to get an F, and it is nowhere in between.
Yeah, like and it sounds it's some of those sessions sound oddly like how we approached the writing process for this campaign we're about to enter into now, our second campaign, where it was like we would just throw a lot of ideas out there. We'd have like group sessions where we'd just get together after we finished the last campaign, and we're just like, let's just start talking about setting. Let's start just talk about some lore things, like whatever you got, just shout it out, and let's just start like writing these things down. And someone would have an idea and be like, okay, like, hey, yeah, do you have something for this already? I was like, nope, it's yours. Like, go ahead. Like, it's like, let's see what you got, like we had a player write an entire homeworld for himself and like how that all works. And I'm like, yeah, please. Like, that's like, if you want to write the lore, it's all yours now and it's canon forever. Right. Like it's just so, that's so beautiful. So I guess, from those idea sessions, then like from like all of the work that everyone was kind of like putting in, all the ideas that were flying around, how did you take all those seeds for what is now the final project and like essentially get them into something that could be published, right? And I guess to that degree, right, is there any advice that you could share for any aspiring authors or writers or homebrew creatives in our audience that may want to be getting into the same kind of thing?
Okay. My best advice to any creative is don't create by yourself. Creation is additive, and if two people create something together, you're getting value added because those two ideas, they sort of mingle with each other, and you end up with an entirely better source of work than you would have had if each of you had contributed individually. There's something to be said for the power of collaboration, and so bringing people on, perhaps people who are experts or very skilled at different areas, is going to make your overall product better. One of the things that was very important for us with this product, besides that it be evocative, would be that if a dungeon master were to drop this into their campaign, that it would feel, for lack of a better word, systems-wise balanced and understandable. And there's a lot of product out there that is very imaginative and creative, but there's not that understanding of, if I drop this into a game, is this going to be a better option than somebody else might pick? Is it going to be difficult for me to understand? Is it going to put a lot of additional work on me as a dungeon master? Does it take away agency from the player? Wild magic sorcerer, I'm looking at you. We want to create something that if you said, okay, yeah, you can play something out of that book, the dungeon master doesn't have to find ways to nerf it or find ways to change their campaign, while at the same time just giving everybody something cool to do, some cool way to add to the story. So we did bring on people that were talented with that. We did bring on people who knew how to tailor the writing so that it would be easier to understand on the page. Our editing team was top notch. The layout was incredibly important, and that it not only looked like a fun supplement, but also in places looked like a cookbook, because it is a cookbook. I mean,
it is, yeah.
There's delicious recipes in there. Please try them. They're great. The Gluttonous Geek, she really outdid herself, but we needed to have a layout that conveyed fun, conveyed lightheartedness, conveyed the whimsy of a joke, while at the same time looked like a cookbook. There was a lot of things we were trying to weave together. It would not have been possible without just a big team of people who were contributing where they felt that they could the best.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. It's just with the amount of content that's in this, like just in a few pages, really. You know what I mean? Like there's I can tell there's a lot of work went into this. So part of it seems like a large majority of that work, aside from the actual recipes and the actual cookbook part of this cookbook, there's a ton of subclasses, right? It looks like a 2 for every class that includes Artificer. Which, thank you for that. Thank you so much for including Artificers in this, because that's one of my favorite classes outside of Warlock. But have you played any of these yourself?
So besides the writing, I'm also a professional dungeon master. I've I ran a couple games of Light of Xerxes over Start Playing. You know, feel free to look me up there if you want. I ran a couple campaigns there, and uh, I allowed the Spelljammer's Cookbook, and just saw the fun that people are having. One person really got into the huge ray gun that the
Yes.
artificer had. He's like, I'm going to play a gnome, and the gun's going to be 3 times my character size, and it's going to have all sorts of lights and whistles and make funny noises, and I'm going to create them during the game. Like, I'm going to start describing random things and making weird noises with my mouth, and y'all are just going to sort of deal with it. And we're like, no, we're not going to deal with it. This is awesome. Like
Yes.
be that person.
That level of commitment to a character is like, it's incredible. I mean, like my partner Nicole, when I first met her, playing a one shot, and she wanted to play a bard that played a recorder, which is not an instrument that's typically in the handbook. But I was like, yes, and she's like, I was like, you can play a recorder if you bring one and learn how to play a song on it. And she did. She learned how to play Despacito on the recorder, and yeah, and that was our first time meeting in person. Yeah, it's just that's the kind of stuff you get when you have like great character design, right? Like for me, for example, like I mean, I didn't end up choosing it, but a part of me wishes I had chosen the Circle of Sanitation cleric, because that is just one of the most brilliant and like silly subclasses I've seen in this compendium of just the sanitation domain, which makes sense for a future setting, right? I mean, cleanliness is next to godliness.
It sure is, and that was its own joke. But I mean, honestly, if you think about it, though, if you're out in space for extended periods of time, somebody like that would be really valuable. You know, the amount of disease that flew around, and you know, this is based on swashbuckling wooden warships and vessels, and you know, in the oceans. Sanitation was the big killer. It wasn't other ships. It wasn't pirates or privateers. It was disease. And having somebody like that on your ship, that's kind of cool. And so when they pitched that idea, I laughed. Obviously, the jokes about cleanliness next to godliness were made, but then we're like, but that is really cool. Like, run with it, go make that happen. And they delivered. Having to get character art of somebody with like that was something else. We're like, well, how would you like that character illustrated? Can you put something like that would clean something in their hand?
Yeah, I just need to, for the audience, I'm going to describe this for them, but I encourage you to pick up this supplement for yourselves and just like appreciate just the artwork alone in this. But like the sanitation domain cleric looks like it's almost like a morning star, but it's a toilet brush and like and like a little spray bottle on their neck, like that, like just the details in these pieces. I really lend themselves to sort of, again, that whimsy you were speaking of, right? Of like, this is supposed to be whimsical and funny, and you know, where you like you have your gritty characters, but you also have like your silly, like there's some silliness here, and there's
it makes sense because every ship needs someone to clean out the head, and you're gonna run best when you find someone who's like, joke's on you, that's my kink.
Oh no!
Like someone who can just lean into it.
Even for us, like, you know, we're planning on setting things a little bit further into the future than like your traditional swashbuckling days, but there's still going to be elements of that, right? Because like we're still keeping with like a lot of the same Spelljammer rules with the air envelopes and the way space travel works. It's just that everything's going to look a little bit more futuristic, right? Because I think that all of us have been dying. Okay, as all the stars fan myself, right? Star Trek, Star Wars, Star whatever, right? Like I've been dying to be able to play this game in a sci-fi setting, you know, because it's just, there's so many more stories you can tell that I just feel like a medieval fantasy setting you can't really explore certain things like that in the same way. So just to have like these layers though to add on to it. So like, yeah, we can be telling the serious story, but we still got like, you know, Circle of Sanitation dude over here, or your guy with a giant ray gun over there. And, you know, we get to balance the actual like story content with also just the absurdity of it all, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're right. Like, so science fiction lends itself to a number of stories that are really reflective. Like, you project everything into the future or into a far off place or a different time. But really, the stories that you tell through sci-fi, the really good stories, they're about you. They're about your lived experience and where you're at. And you can look at everybody from the greats such as Asimov or Heinlein, all the way to contemporaries, and they will all tell you that all of these stories, while they're set in far off places, they're meant to be relatable to us and really to shine the spotlight on us. But do it in a way that doesn't feel like it's getting in your eyes. So you see that in novels, you see that in Star Wars, Star Trek. Those stories are about us. They're not about people in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. They're about us now. We're just telling it through this allegory.
Yeah, it's honestly brilliant. That's why I just feel like, we need more sci-fi stories out there. I've always loved sci-fi, whether it's all the Star Wars things or reading The Expanse and watching The Expanse, for example, is another big one that I was super into, because that's like proper, like that's humanity colonizing the solar system. Like that's just like, a glimpse into what like a near future setting would be, for humanity. And I find those stories to be incredibly fascinating with the way that just, we as humans operate sometimes, and how we could be both, incredibly wonderful to each other, also incredibly cruel, and like just exploring those stories and telling, and those difficult sometimes like concepts, but doing it through a lens where it's less like in your, you said, in your eyes or in your face, where it's, we can kind of mask it through this slight, lens of fantasy. Also apply like Clarke's third law, which we talk about a couple of times, which is, was it sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And like, that's really what, we want to embrace, is that sort of feeling of magic and technology sort of being fused together is both a way to better lives, but also, it's capable of other destructive elements as well, because magic is so much of everything, right?
It's easier to use a future setting to tell a story about your fears for the future than using a past setting to tell a story about your fears for the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're completely right there. And well, so the Roddenberry rule. So Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, had a rule that he insisted upon. And it pretty much held all the way until we saw a little bit of it in Next Gen. You saw a lot more of the fall away from the Roddenberry rule in DS9. But his rule was, when we're telling stories, we know we're telling allegories for the human experience. But when we point to the faults in us, we instead point to somebody that the people meet, that our crew meets. We want to have a crew that's aspirational. So we have, Kirk and Spock and Bones and Chekhov and Sulu, George Takei, if you're listening, hey. But when we're talking about our own foibles, we will say this alien group. Look at how they handle things, and the way that they handle things is the way we handle things, right? It points to the ridiculousness in us, so that it prevents people from becoming defensive. They don't feel like it's necessarily pointed directly at us. Yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, it's really appreciate you sharing that. Wow, that's going to segue kind of slightly, not at all, to the next question we have, but. You mentioned, with the stories that you were telling, or kind of what the intention of this particular cookbook was, like, is jam, right? The joke was about jam, and
yes,
and preserves, and needing those kinds of foodstuffs for long journeys, especially traveling in space, just as people did when they were traveling long journeys on the ocean. So the Gluttonous Geek, created a lot of these, or crafted a lot of these recipes. Have you tried any of these for yourself? Like, have these been brought to any of your game tables, or have you made any of these for yourself?
These have been brought around. So I missed, unfortunately, the big tasting where a lot of these were brought because a lot of the team resides in the Atlanta area. Unfortunately, I didn't get to try the chutney, which makes me really sad, because the chutney was where my heart was at. the flavors, we approach the exact same way as we approach the subclasses. Like, go nuts, Catherine. Mix ingredients that you want to mix. Try something new, and that is absolutely what she delivered. She just she went all out with. It's just like, okay, I don't have any limits. No. Make some they're savory, make some they're spicy, make some they're sweet, and have a good time. And so that is indeed what she delivered. The chutney was where I was at. I have been told repeatedly that the moon melon nectar is to die for.
Yeah, just to also, was she also the one who took the photos of the food? Because let me tell you, those are very inviting. Like, and it looks like, especially the moon melon nectar, like literally looks like alien food, but like it does look familiar. It's just that it has that, like, it literally, like, just from the photo, looks like it's like sci-fi.
Yeah,
it's like totally, little pink things. Yeah.
Yeah, she totally cooked it. She totally photographed it. She is such a talented creative. And by all means, you should absolutely try her recipes, and you should support her. She isn't limited just to Dungeons and Dragons. She's created recipes based on all different sorts of properties, and they're so good. Holy cow!
That's the coolest thing. That's the coolest thing ever. So I had another question. So it seems like we have a little bit of time. This is one of those things. Is like, there's been a lot of talk about it recently, and I guess we'd be remiss if we didn't address it, because we do talk about it also in our upcoming episode 0, or Between Two Campaigns, in one of these 2 episodes that we've recorded recently. But we also live in a bit of a future state now in our modern day reality, right? So technology, like as far as like, AI and all these things have sort of come into the forefront of our existence, as far as like, being tools that are accessible now for the general public. Since we're talking about all these fantastical elements, these sci-fi things, I was actually kind of curious to get your opinion about, or your thoughts on, like, what you feel maybe the place of technology and like AI like is within, like, even just fantasy tabletop gaming or like storytelling, right? Because there's a lot of controversy, right? That's surrounding these things. And, I acknowledge that these things are tools, but like, we can't, it doesn't replace humans, right? Like the creative element still is within the human that is, going forth to try to make something, or using these as tools, right? Like these AI, these tools can't create stuff on their own that's anything compelling, or even that makes a lot of sense. But I'm curious about what your thoughts are, regarding AI and those types of tools for, writing, or just, using as aids within fantasy gaming, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's a broad topic, I know, and it might be a bit of a loaded question, but yeah, I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
This is something that's an ongoing discussion in just about every circle that I'm in. And I hear a lot of perspectives in every direction. There's a very active community chat among the moderators of the big D&D 5e group that I'm a moderator on. And if you were to look at this product, the things that are going to stick out with you the most are going to be the human-generated elements. It's going to be the layout. It's going to be the character art. It's going to be those recipes. It's going to be the clever writing. The products that people have put together. And there is, as of yet, there's nothing at this point that can compete with people. Now, and since we're talking about sci-fi right now, in every form of sci-fi that isn't dystopian sci-fi, computers do not take away the work that's creative in humanity. When we talk about Star Trek, we talk about the planet Earth in a post-scarcity society, where people no longer need to work, in a factory to make a living, and everybody's needs are provided for. The people spend their lives still in work, but their work tends to be more creative and passionate. And so, folks are less worried about the grind and more worried about, hey, I'm really driven to explore how far science can go, or I'm going to run the chateau and make some really, really bad wine. Looking at you, Picard. No, that's a joke. It's an inside joke. You get it if you research why Chateau Picard wines taste bad. Now they're delicious, but yeah, they're look it up. It's there.
That's a rabbit hole I'm going to be jumping down after this. Yeah, okay.
It is a total rabbit hole that they joke about in some of the episodes of Star Trek. But those creative pursuits were never taken by machines. Those continue to be pushed forward by people. And so that's kind of where I am. We also have a large number of people who are creative, who we know are generating better work than AI, who need to eat. Like, they absolutely need to eat. And so the creatives I'm telling you about that put this, every single one of those are people that need to eat. The sales of this help them eat. This is how they feed themselves. So, when we talk about AI, we look at the technology, but we fail to mention that, okay, but now what are these folks going to do that need to eat? So you're going to get subpar product and starve people. At the same time, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that for a lot of people who are trying to create early on, a barrier to entry would be that art piece. We've created a status quo in the gaming product community that says we need to have a large product with a bunch of custom art. Oh, and you need to price it at $4.99 or less.
Right.
Like, it's not even possible. It's not even possible to do that and still ensure that people are fairly compensated for their time.
That's always been the biggest challenge I feel like I've seen too, is like, because like when I think about for our show, even like, hey, if we wanted to generate some character art or get some of these supplemental things that maybe we ourselves aren't able to kind of just churn out. Like we want to pay an artist, right? So we would, save up our money or stuff that donations that are sent into us to ensure that, whomever we're asking to do this is compensated, because it's like, that's time and effort. You know what I mean? And even an AI cannot generate these types of things. And I feel there's a lot of, especially when it comes to AI generated art, I think that there is a lot more ethical concerns in my mind, at least, when it comes to using that in any way. Like I refuse to use AI art for anything that we create, because I just feel like, with the way that stuff is sourced and not necessarily knowing if it's pulling from, I guess a repositories or building its knowledge off of something that is completely, I guess, open source or not, attributed to a particular artist's work. I just don't want to run the risk of, infringing on someone else's literal job, livelihood. I think that in the way that we've employed AI to help us write this campaign, it's mostly been like, hey, I have all of this data I wrote. Can you please help me make this a table? You know what I mean? It's like it's like menial tasks, stuff that would just that just saves us the grind work of organizing our thoughts. You know what I mean? But the thoughts themselves are still original, because if you ask an AI to generate, say you ask an AI to generate a solar system, right? It's going to give you the most generic output you could possibly imagine, because there isn't that creative mind, there isn't that those extra details that are good. You have to feed it those details in order for that detail to come through in whatever the output is. And so that requires a creatively minded person. And so I'm with you in that. It's I just don't feel that these tools are intended to replace people. The people are still the driving force behind why we create and who we create for.
The one thing I noticed when we were doing this, the AI writes crappy fluff, but pretty decently consistent crunch.
I'm not a Luddite when it comes to finding new ways to use technology.
Right.
And on the flip side of it, you can make a very, very compelling case for how that current drive toward creating these bigger products at an incredibly low price point would absolutely price out new creatives or creatives that don't have a space like a space currently built, and disproportionately, those folks are minority. Our community is still it's still largely it's still largely a majority, like a white, often male community, and I don't want to tell other folks that they can't sit at the table. I don't want to put up artificial barriers. We just need to find a way to get everybody to the table still, which is absolutely where I want this hobby to go, but at the same time, not starve people who they're counting on this to make ends meet and support their families. And I wish I had an easy answer. I mean, I wish I'm like, and I have the answer right now.
Yeah. It goes into the age-old question we haven't answered yet: is how do we turn boys' clubs into not boys' clubs? Like the nerdy pursuits, STEM, half of that the more physical half of industry.
Yeah, and yes, it's one of these things where it's like, this is a game, especially just if we just talk, especially just in the concept of the game that we all love and that we're here to talk about, right? Like it's supposed to be accessible. It's supposed to allow anyone to create whomever they want and with whatever motivations, and be able to kind of like see that out, right? To like live this, to be able to just engage creatively with, even if it's just like the way you tell stories or the way you build your character. Like there are no barriers, or there should be no barriers to these types of things. And when it comes to creating, it's like, pay your artists, folks. This is your official PSA from the Hapless Heroes podcast. Pay your freaking artists. Go pick up a copy of the Spelljammer Cookbook, because I tell you what, we've certainly enjoyed it. And it was well worth, you guys only have this up for I think it was like $15 on like the DM's Guild, which is still, I would say, a steal for how much you're getting with this.
Yeah. There's 80 pages of content, and we joke and say that's the fourth book in the slipcover, because it's the same size as the other 3 books inside the slipcovers. It's the fourth book, and it's tailored toward character options, of which the slipcover, which is wonderful, doesn't have a ton of.
So thank you for that. So I guess what I want to say then in closing, because going off of this rant of paying your artists, I want to make sure that we just go right into, speaking of paying our artists and supporting our artists, Connor, I would like, I just wanted to ask you, I guess, if there's any other things that you're involved with, I know you mentioned your charity. I know you mentioned a few things at the start during your introduction, but are there any other things that you're currently involved within that you'd like to give a shout out to, or any people you'd like to give a shout out to for the folks to follow or check out, or anything exciting on the horizon?
Okay, so if we're talking about people to follow, I would highly recommend, if you go to the credits page of the Spelljammer's Cookbook, any of the names listed, I'm very confident they are great people that are worth a follow. They are great creatives and just wonderful folks. They all deserve that follow. I would highly recommend certain organizations that do really good work. The Word Refinery has come into its own as an organization that helps give people a chance to create. It helps lower that barrier of entry that we were talking about for new creatives, and gives them an opportunity to tell stories. And so, you see the Spelljammer's Cookbook, you're holding on to it. Right now, Kaboa is getting ready to go out. It was a highly anticipated and well-received Kickstarter. You're going to see other books in the space. I'm pitching a couple ideas similar to the Spelljammer's Cookbook to get those into the hands of dungeon masters and players, give you some more options there. I would recommend certain conventions out there that are really doing a lot of the heavy lifting as far as helping to create spaces where some of these cool ideas can come out. And this product wouldn't exist without them. Events such as, I just mentioned, Big Bad Con is a wonderful event for that. Dragon Con is a wonderful event for getting creatives together. It's pretty big, but you can get a lot of folks get together for that one. Gamehole Con in Wisconsin. I'm obviously a big fan of D8 Summit, but I'm kind of biased. We're a pretty big charity convention, one of the larger ones. But get to know those conventions out there that They're just creating spaces for creatives to create and are putting great content on your table, because a lot of those cool ideas that you're playing with now have their roots at events like those, big or small, local. I'm not going to knock any local con anywhere. That's where I met a lot of the folks that contributed to this.
That's incredible. Well, I just, I wanted to personally thank you again for joining us and talking through some of these things. Cause like, I know we've talked about the cookbook a lot, but we talked about a lot of other, concepts of just about, what this game means to us and, why we're doing this to begin with. And I just wanted to thank you for, just being so open and just such a wonderful human. It's just really great to see like how other creatives are doing, or just, what's happening in the wide world of like tabletop RPGs and elsewhere. Right. Like, I mean, I did a lot of research into like, a charity organization and whatnot prior to you coming on. And, I really admire a lot of what you've done as a creative, Connor. So I just wanted to give you a personal sort of like just, accolades from us here at Hapless Heroes. I think we all, really admire you quite a bit, and we're excited to use some of these things that you've worked on with all these wonderful people, because it's exciting for us to be able to sink our teeth into something like this and just kind of take it and run. So thank you again.
Well, I thank you. I really look forward to hearing some of the ways that your players are going to use this to craft entertainment for your listeners. When I was approached and I explored your podcast, I was immediately impressed at the stories you tell, how compelling that they are, how funny they are, while at the same time, like, it really did capture what it's like for so many of us at the table. Those relationships. A 7-year season 1 is like mind blowing. When I was describing the podcast to Sean, and I'm like, you realize that this podcast has been going on for over 7 years. This campaign, they just finished a 7-year campaign. He's like, dude, like what? I'm like, yeah, like 7 whole years for one campaign. Like, they are getting into this and telling the story. And there was more content than I could digest. Like, there was so much more content than I could digest. So I'm like, how do I do this? So I'm like listening to snippets. I'm listening to your recap and your listener questions. And I'm like, wow, this is really something. You've got something special. And I hope your listeners hear that. And I intend to tell people to listen to this podcast. I'd also like to reward your listeners. So I am happy to pass along some discount codes for a couple free copies that you can give away to listeners as you wish. So this is something that I'm happy to do for you all. So keep that in mind, and don't delete my email. Reach out to me, and I'm happy to share that with you.
Yeah, we'll figure out how to do maybe a giveaway of sorts, and if anyone, for those who are interested, it sounds like a great idea. And thank you for that. That's wonderful. I'm sure after folks listen to this episode, they're going to be probably eager to pick up a copy for themselves. So we'll share more information as we kind of get all that stuff coordinated and get those codes out to you. Well, without further ado, then, I think we're going to go ahead and outro the show. First of all, Connor, like I said, thank you for joining us. Where can the people find you on the internet if they wanted to follow you, before I go into my whole spiel?
Okay. If you would like to find me on the internet, there's a couple places you can do that. You can go to my website, which is thehealerdm, all one word, .card with 2 R's.com. From there, you can find links to my email, links to products that I've created, links to my professional dungeon mastering and the like. You can also find me on Twitter, where you can often find me ranting about what I like about popular media, especially sci-fi or gaming, or my general passion toward equality and equity. That is at the Healer DM on Twitter. So both of those are very accessible. My DMs are open. I've never closed them. If you follow me, expect a mutual, because I feel the best conversations go both ways. So I tend to mutual everybody. And hopefully I get a chance to hear from some of your listeners.
Yeah. So folks, you heard it here. Go find Connor, say hello, say some nice things about him, tell him we sent you. Yeah. So
say you like my food. That's pretty much what I'm looking for. Call me pretty, say you like my food.
Well, Connor, you're pretty. We like your food. And without further ado, that's going to be an end to the Hapless Heroes podcast. We will see you next time for our episode 0. So stay tuned. In the meantime, if you'd like to find us on the internet, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Hapless Heroes. We also have a link tree. It's just linktree/Hapless Heroes. Those have all the links that are going to point to all the places you can find us on the internet, including our Discord server, which I would encourage any of you listening to join our community and engage, with us in conversation. Across those social media platforms, we are, as Connor mentioned, going to be running a giveaway for some free download codes for the Spelljammer's Cookbook. So just keep your eyes open. We will be posting the instructions and how we're going to run the giveaway in after this episode airs. So we look forward to sharing this content with all of you. Otherwise, we have a Patreon also. It's patreon.com/haplessheroes that just has, if we have some bonus content and some other things for you to listen to and enjoy. If you want to donate to us or support us in that way. But otherwise, we just can't wait to share all the different ways we're going to use these homebrewed materials in our next campaign. And we will see you next time for our episode 0. So thank you again to Connor Self for joining us. Thank you to you, the audience, for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye now.